If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. In this episode, I am joined with former student and owner of West Coast Strength in West Salem, Oregon, Alex Whitaker, for their annual 12-week transformation challenge to discuss training and nutrition for health and wellness, body composition, performance, and aging well.
Okay, so I think most of you guys know me, so this is home field advantage for me, which makes this really easy. I'm Alex. I own West Coast Strength. My background primarily is as a strength coach and self-proclaimed fitness expert. Dr. Armstrong, who is with me, is an actual fitness expert. He's got the PhD next to his name. He was one of my professors at Western. While I was there, primarily the time that I shared was with him, Dr. Castor and Dr. H. So those are the three people that I feel like had the biggest influence on me and had a good undergrad experience at Western. Western's a small college with a pretty well-rounded exercise science program, which is cool because you don't go there and come out with a specialization in one thing without having touched on some other subject areas. The program's developing really well out there. I still have some ties to go out there and speak a little bit. We have pulled a ton of employees and coaches kind of from Western. It's a small alumni network, and it really doesn't mean anything if you go anywhere, but if you're in the Willamette Valley and you say Western Oregon, half of us that still live here, Wasco back there, have gone there. So cool program. So Dr. Armstrong, thank you for being here with us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. I don't like the term expert, so I generally deny any being an expert because I feel like an expert means you know everything about it. And I'm learning as much. Well, I'm learning a little bit more than my students at any given point because the field grows, our understanding grows. And I'm always, I think, a little bit ahead of my students. And sometimes, people like Alex come into the classroom and they ask the right questions and I don't maybe know the answer. I learned from that. And so it's a constant learning battle.
The best thing how to be a fitness expert is you just kind of fake it till you make it. It seems to work pretty damn well. You end up with a gym.
There you go.
If you do that. So what we originally did with this presentation a couple of years ago, we only did one seminar. Now we're trying to do a lot of little kind of consumable things for you guys every couple of weeks while we're doing the challenge. So the first year, 2020, hell of a year, we did the nutrition seminar. And basically it was easy, but it was pretty abbreviated and detailed enough at the same time to what is nutrition, how should you apply these things. And I think were you guys there the first year? So yeah, so year 3, I got to make sure I throw some new stuff in here for you guys. The second year, which was 2022, last year, we did sort of the same thing, but we wrapped up kind of a speed version of what nutrition is and how to apply it. We got into some Q&A stuff. So I'm going to kind of quickly overview the topics we're going to go through today, give us a baseline. So if you knew nothing about nutrition, you could show up to this, you could hear at least the introduction, and then what we'll get into, I think, will be pretty easy to understand. I was up here a couple weeks ago while my coaches were doing their panel. They had 6 or 7 of them. And Seth, who's our head trainer, he's super smart guy, alien smart, starts throwing out K-counts. And I was like, Seth, what's a K-count? That's a calorie. And so to have a baseline of talking about nutrition, which kind of goes into what are nutrients really quickly, a calorie is just a determinant of energy. That's all it is. It's just a measure of energy, X miles an hour. So when we talk about calories, we're really just talking about consuming energy. And in that, the basic things are macronutrients. And this is a hot topic where hey, what are your macros? How much protein should I eat? So if you didn't know, a macronutrient is just one of these 3 things. It's just going to be protein, carbs, and fats. So you've got short-term energy with carbohydrates. This is what your body needs right now, gasoline. You've got fats, long-term energy, sustainable energy, and triglycerides. This is something that's going to give you a burst of energy and sustain you throughout a day. Then you've got protein is still energy, especially if you don't have any carbohydrates, you don't have any fats. If you're starving, your body will prioritize using protein as energy. But in general, protein really is just this building block for your body to be able to repair. I look at protein as kind of almost filler, like it's the baseline of what a diet sort of is. And based on your body and what your needs are from a fitness level, from an aging standpoint, there is a rough, really very broad prescription for how much protein a person should eat. So what are calories? Calories is just a measure of energy. And what does that go into? Proteins, carbs, and fats. It's not to say that those are the most important things. And probably I think the conversation, just because everybody on the internet learned it a couple of years ago, is like carbs, fats, and proteins. Now, my grandma is a self-proclaimed nutrition expert. She uses the word expert. And basically what that means is for 50 some years, my grandma has been obsessed with taking vitamins, minerals, and supplements. So those go into your micronutrients, all the small things that on a cellular level, this is what your body needs to be able to do what it does well. And yeah, those things are really important, but to just kind of give somebody an easy snapshot of what they should focus on, when you start talking about eating clean and getting into your macros, carbs, fats, and proteins, the micronutrients do, I would say, kind of tend to take care of themselves if you eat in a well-rounded enough way. But that's just sort of an abbreviation of, what is nutrition, what is energy, what are calories. So that way you can start to understand like what you're eating. Most people, I think, when they're looking at their food, don't understand that they're eating a really high amount of fat, or maybe they're not eating enough carbohydrates, and they're kind of causing all these insensitivities and these spikes and these drops in your body. So when I started to look at my food, and I learned this a long time ago, now I look at it in terms of energy. Every single meal in my head has to have a protein base to it because that's what's kind of keeping my body alive. And then energy-wise, I'm getting fats or I'm getting carbohydrates, and then you learn sort of how to intelligently place that energy throughout the day based on where your energy needs are. But also there's a bunch of different ways that you can design a diet to give yourself stable blood sugar and insulin, or you can spike it way up and down to create more efficiencies. So there's a lot of different ways that you could go and start to play with carbs, fats, and proteins. But before you do that, you just kind of got to know what they are in the first place. And so that's my very basic explanation to like nutrition intro, complemented by what he wants to say next.
I don't have much to say. I think you were taught well.
Okay, yeah. And here's the thing. It starts off with any of this stuff, and this is school. So this is kind of the broken system of school, is you're going to memorize and regurgitate all these things. And that's what I did when I was in college. And I guess that's kind of where we start, is memorize and regurgitate what these things are. And then at some point, your interest is going to peak and you're going to actually want to know like what these things do. Most of us in here are lifting weights. And so that's where selfishly we're getting into like, what does my nutrition do for me? And I guess if we talk about nutrition, the three things that I wanted to say, because they kind of get confused, are when there's nutrition, we're probably talking about three different topics. We're talking about health and well-being, and there's a baseline of what nutrition is for health and well-being. There's what's nutrition for weight loss. And then there's me and Tate. A lot of what we eat probably, and what I used to eat, what Tate eats now via my instruction, is not per se for health and well-being or for weight loss. It's purely for performance. Like, what do I need to throw in this car to race it around the track as fast as possible? So we'll really quickly, and I'll let him sort of do like the touch points on this, go through them. So do you want to start with weight loss, sports nutrition, or the baseline of sort of health and well-being?
I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging. Start with the health and well-being, because I think that's the foundation. I mean, if you're not healthy and well, then trying to manage body composition, trying to either gain muscle mass or lose fat or do both, or trying to perform is going to be kind of useless. That's kind of like, putting fancy tires on like a 1972 Chevy, and it's all rusted out and everything, but you got these like $1,000 rims on the car, and the car looks like shit. So
The first thing I do is I put fancy wheels and tires on a shitty car, so I don't know. Start there.
first thing you should really do is work on the engine to make sure the engine's working properly, right?
See, practical. That's much more practical. So for most people, let's just say, I mean, this is obviously a fitness-based population. Where would we start with like health and well-being? You know, how many times a day would you say is a baseline to eat? Do I have a balance of carbs, fats, and proteins? Do I just kind of try and like keep my hand out of the cookie jar and start with like, you know, some practical steps to like eating clean? Where do we go?
Yes. I mean, I think it is, for the health and wellness piece of it, it is really just a matter of, you know, starting to look at what am I eating and what is it doing for my body, and beginning to just shift toward eating healthy stuff. I mean, we feel like we got to eat organic, or we have to eat, you know, really expensive food in order to be nourishing our bodies. I hear that a lot, that, you know, to eat healthy, it's expensive. And that's not really my viewpoint. I think to eat healthy and eat cheaply, you just have to pick the right foods, right? And pick what are the healthiest foods that I can afford at this point that are going to allow me to sustain my health, sustain my daily physical activity. And that's, you know, just good, you know, healthier grains, you know, getting healthier carbs. You know, if you're going to eat your vegetables, which you should be eating your vegetables, you know, what can I afford that is going to have the most nutrients and the best bang for my buck? You know, and for me, that was always when I was in my poorest times. And I've been there before. I've lived in New York this was back in the early 90s. My food budget was like $25 a month, or $25 a week. I couldn't imagine living on $25 a month.
Depending on the time.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't think you're that old to where your budget was 25.
No, this was like in the 1990s. And I lived basically on, I bought a big bag of short grain, organic brown rice. I got it through a co-op. It was like probably a 25-pound bag. It was relatively cheap. I just make up a bunch of that at the beginning of the week, partition that out. That was kind of my starchy carb through the week. Lived on a lot of carrots because carrots are cheap. There's a lot of bang for the buck there. A lot of eggs. Eggs weren't as expensive as they are now. You know, oatmeal, and, you know, like fruit to go was like apples. But part of that was I was able, where I was working, they had apples for the customers coming in. So I could always grab a few each day. But I kept it really simple and stuff. What can I afford is going to be the most nutritious for my body. And then you begin to go from there. I don't know. That's enough in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, because this will kind of dovetail into weight loss pretty well, is from like a personal standpoint on like mental, spiritual, emotional health and like physical health, that I've like, as I get into my 30s, I start to look at things a lot differently. I asked my question a couple years ago that like, well, what is wellness and what is well-being? And the first thing that I really defined that as was a lack of sickness. And so a lack of like, you know, maybe the more negative things. And that's where, what should I eat? I really start with most of my clients. I've got pros and I've got people that are just trying to lose 100 pounds that hire me online. So I think it starts with like taking the shitty food out, because I mean, that's where we're going to get to this lack of sickness. Like the well-being aspect will come from a lack of like the negative things that cancel out. You know, if you wake up and you're here with us at 5 a.m. you're doing your cardio, you're lifting, and then like you're throwing beers back at like 8 o'clock, like, well, you know, +1, -1 sort of a thing. And so, I think most people right now, it's kind of about getting out of our own way and being able to remove like the crap that we're having. And that's where most of weight loss, like when I'm starting to work with somebody, is like, what are the foods that I can pull out? And I would say most of my clients, when I get somebody, and this is an athlete that is already has, you know, some acumen for nutrition and wants to take it to the next level, or I shared in the last seminar, I'm helping my grandma lose a lot of weight right now. She's lost it's like 50 some pounds since like July, and she's a heart failure person. So we're in a have-to state of losing weight. So from a motivation and adherence standpoint, like we got to like, hey, we have to lose weight because we're going to die if we don't. It's a pretty motivating factor. But the biggest thing is kind of just pulling out those things. But every one of my clients, high level or low level client, probably is doing 3, 4, or 5 things that are pretty low hanging fruit that are wrong. those basic things are, I have a prescription for like meal timing and kind of biohacking the body that's every 2.5 to 3 hours. That's nothing crazy. A lot of that really is just based on digestion and absorption, that per my prescription of how much protein I want Zach to eat, that he can't eat that all in 1 or 2 or 3 sittings. So it's got to be divided throughout the day. So that's like kind of a common fault is that I'm going to actually contradict myself when I tell you guys how I eat now versus what I prescribe to eat. But a big one was there's this great metabolic effect from eating first thing in the morning, getting the body going and having this sort of energy spike throughout the day where your body's burning more at rest. And that's a nice little hack thing that I throw in for a lot of people, especially aging people, aging women, postmenopausal. Those are things that I think really start to speed things up where they're conditioned to their body's moving a lot slower. But it's usually 3, 4, or 5 things wrong that somebody is doing. And any one of those people, I feel like if I just say like, hey, fix these 3 or 4 or 5 things without a huge prescription of 360 grams of rice, 3 o'clock, eat this, like just very vague stuff. And Tate, you coach a lot of general population people. So you're like, how can I apply a diet with all these people? Like, hey, there's 3, 4, or 5 things. And if you make these adjustments, probably it's going to fix the majority of your problem. There was, for the most part, before a few years ago, there was no calorie tracking, and there was, a pretty like good amount of fit people that didn't have any information on how much protein they should or shouldn't eat, their mealtime, and all the information you guys kind of have at your fingertips. There was no application of that a few years ago. Then why were people fit? Well, it's now easier to eat and drink, and it's a lot of weed in Oregon, so there's a lot of munchies too. So there's enough things going on that are bad that I think have kind of canceled things out. So if I had to give a prescription to anybody, it's like, just start with what you're doing wrong and then pull that out, because that's kind of the first key to wellness, is removing those things that incite more of the sickness or antagonize your problem. And it's junk food and the cycle and the addictions that we go through with eating bad foods. That's me. I eat when I'm happy. I eat when I'm sad. I eat when I'm bored. And I was taught how to do that. It was celebrated as I'm a big guy, that I was taught when I was a kid to like eat big. And if I finished a Big Mac, it was like, hey, attaboy, like good job. So I'm 300 pounds and I'm 15 and, got a lot of fat cells, and there's no longer as many congratulations for that. And now I'm trying to reverse sort of the effects of everything my grandma taught me how to do. And the story that I always tell is I was in a McDonald's drive-thru with my grandma, and I'm like 8 or 9 years old. I remember if I told you this last time, because I like to retell it. I'm with 3 of my friends that are skinny skateboarders, and my grandma asked, what do you want? And I said, I don't want anything. She says, why? I said, because I'm fat. And I'm like, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years old. And she says, you're not fat, and it's okay, it has high protein. So I order a double quarter pounder with cheese, a large fry, and like probably a Big Mac on the side, because my grandma, the nutrition expert that takes vitamins, said that it has high protein. So I guess long-winded on what I'm talking about is you guys could probably all fix the majority of what you want to fix with your nutrition by just like pulling out what you probably already know is bad. That's an addictive cycle. It's really hard to do. Food causes this dopamine response, just like sex and drugs, where as soon as you get like, a little bit of something good in your mouth, your brain celebrates. And then that's an easy thing that we can do, and we can kind of fall into routine. Why do we eat those things late at night when we're bored, or, the influence, I guess? It's just kind of, to point out like what to fix is like take the bad stuff out. How you talk?
Yeah. So, when I look at the wellness approach, I always look at it as kind of an asymptote that you have, if you remember from math class, I know everybody loves math, right? Where you have the asymptote is that line that you never quite get to. And when we start out and taking a wellness approach, whether it's trying to lose weight or just eat healthy, the first things that we do are going to have the biggest amount of effect, right? So if we start making small little changes and, taking those little baby steps, those initial changes are going to make big gains. And then as we get further and further along and we get closer to kind of that ultimate wellness, that ultimate fitness, the gains become a lot harder because we've refined ourselves so well that, small change is not going to have as big of an impact. But as we attempt to get closer and closer to kind of that goal that we want, we start picking at the things and we refine. And that's where we start moving into that kind of the performance aspect of nutrition and things like that. And, some of the things that we can change are relatively small, but they have very huge cumulative effects. I mean, you think of something that is in your diet that is a few calories, and you just eliminate that one thing. How much is that going to add up over the course of a year? Do the math for
Well, I'm going to do that for you. So
Yeah.
I'm going to do the math. So I have a coffee in the morning. It's 300 calories a day. It's not a big deal. I don't.
What are you
eat a lot
putting in
of
that
food.
coffee? You going like Starbucks or
I'm
having like
making
a?
this up. I'm making this up.
You're having that latte.
I don't drink coffee. I drink like this stuff. And for $2.99, you can drink this too at West Coast. So 300, because the routine's a coffee thing.
Yeah.
That's a routine thing, coffee. So I do that. I mean, 365 days a year is exaggerated, but let's do that. And then what do we got in a pound of fat?
3,500 calories. So you're at 109,500 calories drinking that coffee 365 days.
And
You
we're
divide that
like,
by 3,500 kilocalories or calories.
30 pounds a year.
Yeah. So that's a small thing. And that number of calories, that's probably like a sugared pop or soda. I don't know what you guys are here. I'm from the East Coast, but not far enough. My wife is from Long Island, so she's a soda person. I'm from Pittsburgh. I'm a pop person. My kids don't know what to say. And I know Oregon's kind of one of the split states. You're one of the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Soda.
So, but yeah, so I mean, that doesn't seem like much. Just change that one thing, but it has a huge impact. So if it's like, I need to eat more vegetables, you add vegetables, so one meal a day, you're getting benefit over the course of the year. And then you start just refining it more and more as you move closer to your goals.
Well, and this is where probably the hardest battle to win with nutrition. And this is anything, this is savings, this is debt, is the compound effect of things is just so great because now do I have a 300 calorie coffee like every day? No, but like a bite of chocolate is 65 calories, chocolate, 65 calories. That's us. We went through like 2 giant things of Valentine's Day. We went through like 75 pieces of chocolate in like 48 hours or something. And we just did it one bite at a time. And it wasn't that much. I didn't gorge on chocolate. It just was one bite at a time. But enough of those little things add up throughout the day. And that's what's so damn hard is the consistency aspect so far outweighs what you can do in any short period of time. The weight loss that my grandma is accomplishing, she's doing a great job. Like, first and foremost, she's reinforced by the fact that she's terrified to die. That makes it really easy to keep your hand out of a cookie jar when you get to that point. The second thing is that she's not doing anything crazy. Like, she just made small replacement steps to pull this snack out and replace it with like, she uses like, this pudding that's got no calories in it. She slices some strawberries and we just did little things. I first tried to give her what was more of a bodybuilder type of diet, and like she like
Didn't work.
it's not working. Like I think I made her actually relapse into like the cookies because of it. And then we just started on like, how can I sustain her every day, every week, knowing like, hey, we really can't go backwards on this. So how could we do this? And it's just really small steps in planning, but that's probably the hardest thing. The hardest thing is I can sprint and I can be uncomfortable in a small period of time. I can diet for 12 weeks. We're in a 12-week challenge right now. That's what we're all doing. We're all trying to be fit for 12 weeks. But the sustainable aspect really is, and it's boring. The consistency is the key, but like, that's it. And what you do things like these acute episodes of running really hard and getting uncomfortable in a short period of time in this setting is so that you can take that and you can rob it and put it into your everyday life so that you can sustain this thing year round. I know a lot of these people in the room, so I know people that are doing really well. What you guys for like compounding the effect of exercise. I for the most part, we all like to exercise and train. So us getting to the gym 4 or 5, 6 days a week isn't the hard part. It's probably the diet part. And then like Faye and I, we know we can outlift and out-train our shitty nutrition like pretty well because we burn a lot in the gym, thus giving myself even more excuses for my big cheat meals of 10,000 calories every Saturday because I've been eating whatever. It's not 10, it's like 8,000, but repeating the same thing over and over, the consistency aspect, like that's what you guys are probably trying to hack life is to figure out how can I sustain this. And I had a motivation and adherence class, and I think it might have been with you.
Probably was.
Yeah, I had sports psych with Dr. H, motivation and adherence. And my grandma, go back to picking on Granny again, she's about 80 years old. She's eaten this way for a really long time. The motivation level finally got so high because like you won't be here any more years if you don't make this change. For me, this was like a year ago. I got really big before my shoulder surgery, and then I went to have the shoulder surgery and I lost a couple pounds and I came back, my blood pressure was just like out of control. I'm super phobic that I'm gonna have a heart attack any day and any minute because I'm a big guy. And so that freaked me out enough that I like quickly made some changes. I dropped about 30 pounds. I'm like 35 pounds down from what I was there. blood pressure's in check, but like, what was the motivating factor? And I'm a tough person. I can follow a diet plan. I tell people how to diet, but clearly nothing motivated me enough. Well, that outweighing factor of like seeing my blood pressure at 150 or 160, and I'm like, I'm more like 33. So like, what the hell is this? Where's this going to go? Like towards like, I mean, how many 300-pound, 6'4", like 80-year-old dudes do you see? So that is my motivating and adherent factor, is that like, I'm going to be the first, I won't be that big, but I'll be, I'm going to show you guys how old and big I'll be late one day with this. So you have to find something that you can attach to. And I mean, whether it's like, and there's no right or wrong way to do this. Make yourself feel so goddamn bad. You're like, I'm so awful, I can't do this. Like, whatever works. Or make yourself feel so good. I have so many types of athletes, and some of them I spank, and some of them I give them compliments, and I tell them that you're awesome and you're strong, and all these affirmation statements that you make in the mirror before you try and go out and be a hero each day. And it's just knowing your style, because I don't think any one of those is wrong. I just think at the end of the day, you got to get it done. The shit's got to get done. We can't eat this way and sustain it and be healthy. So from a motivation and an adherence standpoint, whatever gets you from point A to point B. Now, you're more of the motivation expert. I always tell my clients I'm a bad motivator, because if you don't want to get from point A to point B, like, I can't put energy and instill want in you. My big guy Chris back there, hello, motivation and adherence. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I don't know about being a motivator. I got 2 teenage kids, and they don't seem to be motivated by me. But yeah, I think the only thing I'd add to that, you talked about chocolate. One of the things I've done is shift toward darker chocolates, to the point where I can't palate like your traditional like Hershey chocolate anymore. And I'm from Pennsylvania. Hershey chocolate is like gold. And you start to train your palate by just making those small little choices and shifting yourself. You can still enjoy the stuff that is kind of decadent, but you make sure that if you're going to enjoy it, if it's something that, you might consider a little bit nutritionally sinful or whatever, that it's worth your while. That.
What about a beer? Because I'm picking on you because I know that's your thing.
I like beers too, there was a time, I'm trying to remember how many years ago it was, I kind of got in our bod pod. That's how we measure body composition in the lab at Western Oregon. And my body composition was a little bit higher than I wanted it to be. And I said, I got to lose some fat. And so kind of went home, told my wife, I got to get on a diet. I got to start kind of losing some of this body fat. We started looking at the ways we could cut calories, and, we moved here from Michigan. Michigan's got decent beer, but kind of going into the Portland area and knowing, Portland's well known for the beers, and you start sampling all the different beers that are out there and really enjoying them. And it's something I don't drink a lot, but, we try and enjoy it. And so we were looking at, well, what about beers? Where are the calories at in beers? And we started looking at some of the high calorie beers. There's actually one that's out there. It's like some kind of Nitro Penguin Imperial Stout or something like that. It's got like 1,000 calories in a pint. You imagine drinking that, thinking, I'm just having one beer. It's not going to hurt me.
Better be worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're going to drink that, it better be worth it. And so we started looking at, well, how can we, cut the calories? And she came home with a 6-pack of Michelob Ultra. I have opened one of those, and I can't do this. I cannot drink this piss water. And so we started looking at, okay, what are the calories? And I kind of figured out a rule of thumb that, and it took me a while to refine it, because at first I realized that 30 kilocalories are calories per ABV for a 12-ounce beer. And then for a while, since everything is in pints, I'm doing all the math in my head, trying to figure out, okay, how many calories is this? Not realizing that if you go from a 12-ounce to a pint, it's just 30 calories versus 40 calories. But if you look at the ABVs and you use that as a general rule of thumb, okay, now I could start going into a restaurant and saying, okay, well, what's the lowest ABVs? What is optimal for my diet and for my taste buds? And we kind of figured out that for us, about 4.5 to 5.5 was kind of the sweet zone for decent tasting, but low enough calories. And then now we've started to discover other beers that are like, there's like fractional IPAs that are like 90 kilocalories or now so you have me sensitive about saying kilocalories, because I always teach kilocalories, but that are much lower calories, but they still have decent taste. And so it's like, I'm looking for the things that are going to taste better, give me some enjoyment and pleasure in life without completely robbing me of enjoyment, but are going to be a little bit better for my overall health and wellness. And I think that's where we start kind of getting into the weight management phase now of nutrition. What allows us to maintain the level of body fat that we really want. And it's just making the right choices and still trying to enjoy yourself. I live up near Portland, and we have salt and straw ice cream. I like that stuff. I don't eat it every day. And I've gotten away from where I would want to eat ice cream all day, every day, but I'm not going to go to the grocery store and buy those little box ice creams, that are like 10 for $1 or something like that. Yeah. I want to make it worth it if I'm going to eat it. Go for dessert. I'm not going to eat a whole cake, but it's got to be a good cake. I don't want some crappy, box type cake to eat. I want to have something that's going to be enjoyable, make me feel satisfied, but I'm not going to just dive into it and eat it all. Does that make sense?
Well, I can share something. You guys, like, what I hear with that is, if I come up here and I say, for 9 years, I have never had a drink. I've never had any chocolate. I've never had any whatever. And start speaking to you guys about how you can do that. Everybody will stop listening, because you just give up. I can't do that. It's not sustainable. It's not realistic. I have kids. We travel, go on vacations. We get in shape so we can go drink and eat and have fun and do those things. So if I'm you guys, I hear that. I go, okay, so I don't have to be perfect. Absolutely not. It's just figuring out what works for you. Now, I, on the opposite end of that, am eating a Winco cake because I'm looking for quantity. I am not, it's moderately sustainable. And that's it. You can kind of be honest with yourself on does this or does this not work for me? And first, I think, there's body fat percentage. For me, it wasn't body fat percentage. I'm a fit enough guy, and I perpetually identify as a fat kid just because that's how I was bullied, and I was always a chubby kid. But I know I'm not that kid anymore. But the blood pressure, that scares me enough. And so there's these things I think that you can kind of use as a measure of dissatisfaction with how you feel in terms of health, wellness, body image, whatever it is. There's a measure there that's going to reinforce this. But at least it's nice to hear from us that you don't have to be perfect. I coach bodybuilders, and there is no less, to say, sustainable diet or less practical way to eat than the way that I have my bodybuilders eat. Ultimately, it is the best way to do what we're trying to do, which is compete at the highest level and be successful against other people that are doing the same things. And so with that, even in the off season, Chris, off season, big and healthy, we're eating some flexible foods, and it is manageable, and we get to have dinner with our wife and kind of partially manage being a person while still trying to be an obsessed type A athlete. So moral of the story, you don't have to be perfect, but it can't be that those things that you're trying to balance into your life contradict the +1, -1. You at least got to go 2 steps ahead and then 1 step back. And on a compounding level, week over week, you got to be able to kind of at least travel some distance and make an impact in your goals. But doesn't have to be perfect. To kind of go through a quick one, what do I need to know about sports nutrition?
Sports, again, it's just getting closer to that asymptote now with nutrition, where you're starting to refine when and what you're eating. Whereas when you're just trying to lose body fat, just trying to eat healthy, you can argue 3 meals, 6 meals a day, nutrient timing. You can talk, intermittent fasting, keto.
You get to Q&A all that stuff. So if there's a specific answer you want, we'll Q&A it.
Every diet is, diet, if you're just simply cutting the calories, is going to get you at least halfway there, when it comes to weight management. And then, you get into your macros, that becomes a little bit more important as you get closer to working and focusing in on your performance. But then you start getting into really ultimate performance. If you want to be a bodybuilder and you want to get down to the level of leanness that you have to be able to compete with maintaining a high level of muscle mass, you're going to have to really refine the diet. And it's a lot more about the quality and quantities of foods, when you eat them, and it becomes a lot more difficult. For an athlete who is performing at a high level and burning a lot of calories, sometimes they can be a little bit worse in their diet than we are, because they simply, you said, having the Winco cake, you can get by with that because you're lifting and performing at a much higher level than I am. And, for me, aging, I can't do that. But as I age and I want to perform better, I still got to eat so that I can maintain some strength, build some strength, and do those types of things. And so you have to kind of look again, what are the goals and what do you need to refine even further to meet those goals? And so performance is where we start talking more in terms of the benefit of carbohydrates and the benefits of selective fats and healthy fats and when we eat those and how they relate to the nature of performance that we're doing.
Yeah, and I'll give you guys sort of a quick prescription. You can ask me questions on it either on the side, but I'll tell you, like, this is what I do with athletes, and this is whether this is like a football player or sports nutrition performance, like high output power athletes, but it's also high program bodybuilders. And I took this concept from a coach. It made a lot of sense, and then the coach didn't really have any science, and then I kind of went and found out the science and figured out how to apply it. And the basic concept was starting with steady state carb intake. And basically that is taking a certain amount of food and dividing it fairly equally throughout the day. That's kind of a baseline, whether it's female or male. That's kind of where I start with somebody. Now, somebody might be used to more food, less food. So I will meet somebody where their metabolism is at. I have an educated guess in my head that comes from doing this for too many years and with a lot of people and knowing body types and aging, postmenopausal, premenopausal. I can just kind of look at somebody and know where I want to start them, but it's always based on what they're eating. So I would take Tim, he's easy, this is what Tim is used to eating. So I take this amount of food, I have him track it for a little bit of time. Now I'm going to reorganize it because what I don't like is I don't like that Tim eats a bunch of carbs in the morning, so his insulin and his blood sugar go way up. And then it comes way down throughout the day where he's flatlining and he has really no energy. And then we have a spike right before he works out in the afternoon, so his energy level comes up again. And I really don't like that wave. That is hard for me to control from a performance standpoint. From a fat loss standpoint, it really sensitizes your or causes a sensitivity issue where your body is very efficient with food, but not in a good way. Meaning it will take a little bit of food and it will do a lot with it because it doesn't know when it's going to get food again. So my steady state carb intake approach is basically based on how many meals you're eating, whether that's 4, 5, 6 meals. I'm going to take your energy, I'm going to put it into an equal amount of food that basically is just like this. So energy is like this throughout the day. Tate is in off season right now, so he's trying to grow with the same thing that we're doing. So here's one meal and here's the next meal. I'm giving him enough energy to where it's high, and then by the time he even gets to the next meal, his energy won't drop off. If anything, I'm giving him a little more energy than he needs. We're building a little bit of body fat. It's not a lot, and I can tell, that we're growing muscle, so I'm okay with the fat we're putting on. But I give him enough energy to get to that next meal where he's not going to burn much in this in between. Now, as we start to back off, what we're going to go into this maintenance phase, it's just enough food to get him from this meal to this next meal. As we start to go, we're going to cut down as he's going into contest season for nationals this next year. It'll be just enough to where if it's 3 hours apart, he's got enough energy. And then right about here, there's a small window where things start to drop. His body has to burn a little bit of energy, but he's in a fed state. So his body isn't stressed. So what it's going to do, it's going to burn just a little bit of body fat. But because he's in this fed state, it's not going to burn any muscle tissue at the same time. And so just taking that, and it's small numbers. It's not that I go from Chris been doing this with me for years. What are they? They're 5 to 10 pound carb adjustments in each meal. If there's 6 meals and I drop 5 grams of carbs per meal, all that is it's 30 grams of carbs. That's only 120 calories a day. And this goes back to some kind of the calories in, calories out. This is interesting. I go and I pull out 300 calories a day, which is a pretty big amount. 7 days a week, that's 2,100 calories. That's not even a pound of fat. And all of a sudden I pull out 300 calories a day and my person stops dropping weight. I'm with Chris. I pulled out, call it 5 grams of carbs, and then all of a sudden he drops 3 pounds of fat in a week. So he went and he burned what is an extra 10,500 calories a week because I intelligently found that sweet spot of him having enough food to be fed, just enough to make him burn fat in between, causing this kind of metabolic spike. And that's just your body hacking itself and kind of burning fat at rest for you while we preserve a lot of this muscle mass. So that's kind of my basic approach, is this steady state carb intake. I don't use a lot of dietary fat, whether in off season or as I'm dieting people down. And that's because I'm using a lot of carbohydrates with this blood sugar insulin trick. And I basically just take fats and I put them, where does your body have a high energy? Zach trains in the morning. So if I'm his coach, I'm going to give him a little bit of extra fats to sustain his energy output in the morning when he trains. As he's inactive in the evening, I don't think that Zach needs a big steak at 9 o'clock at night, because what's he going to go do? He's going to go edit photos. He's going to sit. He's less active. His body's not moving around. So for me, that's kind of my style is I divide protein equally throughout the day. I keep the carbs equal in each meal, and I just barely bring them up, so that way I'm not overfeeding, and I barely bring them down to find that sweet spot where it's almost inexplainable that I can, with Chris, like I said, 120 calorie adjustment a day can get this guy to drop an extra 3 pounds of fat a week just like that, because everything's firing on all cylinders. Body's in a fed state, but it knows that it should be burning fat, but it's safe because it has enough food. And that's won me a lot of shows and done a lot of stuff where I see coaches next to me that basically just rip food out. And all they're doing is eating fish and vegetables and doing cardio 2 hours a day at the end of the prep, and they can't lose the fat. They're not lean. Their body is completely stalled out. And they don't know why, and it's because they didn't make those adjustments in a small, incremental enough way. And from there, they've kind of, I call it, plants do this, it's called nutrient lockout. It's where a plant all of a sudden gets really pissed off and just decides that it doesn't want to listen. And I kind of have noticed the same thing with people's bodies. Sorry, women, I've especially noticed this with women's bodies more than anything, that as soon as it doesn't get what it needs or what it wants, it's pissed off and it's not going to work for you. So,
Sounds like a child.
What's that?
Sounds like my kids.
Yeah, just like that. Yeah, just call that like, oh, you must, throw a carrot at them. So that's kind of my approach to sports nutrition, and basically knowing that what you eat gives me a baseline for what your body's used to. I give a basic prescription, and I just taper up and I taper down, because I don't do anything that's really exaggerated. I find that sweet spot because I don't know exactly where it's going to be. And this is where, if I do a metabolic equation, which is what Armstrong taught me how to do in college, and based on what the book tells me is where your body's going to burn fat, the deficit in the equation, and I give it to you, and it won't work. It just won't, because you have to kind of subjectively find how each person's body responds, and that's small adjustments up and small adjustments down. So that's my long-winded explanation of sports nutrition. But that's the same thing that I do for athletes, because athletes don't need to have these spikes of energy and these drops of energy. I want things to be controllable and level throughout the day. And that's just, that's one way to do it that I've done pretty well with. So yeah, there's my sports nutrition in a bubble.
It's about what it is. I mean, it's all just sustaining that effort and keeping the person at a level where they can perform where they need to perform and how they need to perform. And everybody's a little bit different, so you got to just tweak it so it works for you.
The one that I was going to ask you, how much protein should I eat?
How much protein should you?
That's like somebody walks up to me in the gym. My back hurts. What is it? I don't know. And it's a vague question, but since I know it'll be the Q&A of how much protein should I eat, I'll ask you, and then you get to answer it, because it's on the sports nutrition thing and it's subjective. I know it's a loaded question.
I just keep it simple and go 1 gram per pound of body weight and go from there. For some people that might be too much, but it's not going to hurt you. If it's too little, if you're really, you're not building muscle, you're a bodybuilder or an athlete that is training extremely hard, and you're seeing that you're not keeping up your muscle mass, then you might need a little bit more protein, because you're probably burning some of it for energy. But from the standpoint of how much your body needs in order to sustain, maintain any, the structures within the body, I think it's about 0.6 to 0.8 grams per pound is what's considered kind of what people normally need. So if you top it off at about 1, that's a nice, easy number. I would assume everybody here can multiply by 1, right?
Yeah, I weigh 200.
If not, you can use your calculator, use your phone. But yeah, I mean, that generally works fairly well. If you go over that, it's not going to be hugely detrimental unless you have kidney issues. And you're not
men versus women.
Again, probably women could go a little bit lower than men on that calculation, because based on the difference in body types, our weight distribution, our body compositions are going to be a little bit different. So women might not need quite as much. But again, if you're a female that's training hard, like an athlete or a bodybuilder, you probably need a little bit more too. So again, that one number isn't a very individualized number, but it's an easy number.
Yeah.
I don't know what you normally recommend, but that's kind of my simple answer.
The first answer I ever came up with for anybody in this sport, well, I'd never tell them again, I'd say 2 grams per pound of body weight, right? Right. And so for an example, like what is that? That is, I weigh 275. So that's me at 550 grams of protein per day. And it doesn't work.
10 cans of tuna or something
Yeah,
like that?
it doesn't work. I would say for me, protein really, and this is, to help women out especially, it really comes down to protein, digestion and absorption is what can your gut handle. And so I have a ballpark that tells me that most women can do pretty well with 3 to 4 cooked ounces of protein at one time in a sitting. And then from there, I'll just kind of space the meals out to the place where they're naturally hungry again. I try to really take appetite cueing as a big signal of when you shouldn't eat. Now, the body quickly gets conditioned to not eating very often, which I have sort of done, and I'll share my kind of fasting thing here in a little bit. That contradicts everything I tell my athletes to do. I'm doing the opposite, so I'm my own bad client right now, but it's working for me. But in terms of protein, like it's got to be digestible. It shouldn't make your gut, feeling awful. It shouldn't make you constipated. But that number is like pretty safe for most females, like 3 to 4 ounces of cooked protein, which is anywhere from 20 to 25 grams in a given meal, depending on the person, their activity level. Do they take a probiotic? Those sort of things, digestive enzymes are pretty standard stuff for me with clients, especially when somebody is used to a very low protein diet. If you're only eating 60, 70 grams of protein a day and I bump it up to 125, your gut's going to need something to be able to help that. I've learned, especially for people that are trying to maintain muscle, that I really don't need a lot of protein. I've been lifting and training for a long time, so I have a lot of dense tissue, and I don't really need a whole lot to be able to maintain it. Now, I eat way less, especially animal-based protein. I eat way less protein than I've ever eaten in my life. I'm really not losing that much tissue. I maintain it pretty well. For an example, I have some women clients that can eat 6 to 7 cooked ounces of protein, which is just a ridiculous amount of food. And they rip right through it. These are pro level athletes that are doing really well with the amount of protein I'm giving them. So it's pretty subjective. So I would start with like a basic portion, an educated guess of, if you're a woman, 15, 20, 25 grams is fine per meal. And then just kind of get your body used to it, especially if you're going from what is a normal person diet to a high protein diet. Your body's just going to need some time to acclimate. You'll notice that at first you start off kind of slow and you're not really ready for that next meal. And it doesn't take more than a little bit of time. Your body starts to speed things up and get used to it. But you don't need 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight, as I learned.
It's expensive too.
Yeah, I used to eat 12 cooked ounces of meat per meal 4 times a day, and I had 70 to 80 grams of protein 6 meals a day. So it's 6 times 7, 420, and that was huge. Like anybody, but I was a large guy. Chris, to pick on you in the back there for a second. What cooked ounces at the end of prep? Are we like 9 or 10 ounces?
Yes.
Yeah.
Depending on what it was. And they would have like 370.
Yeah, and that is when this guy is dieted down. He doesn't have enough energy to really meet his body needs, and we're definitely risking burning muscle tissue. So we're throwing a little bit more fuel on the fire. So at a fat loss stage, a higher protein diet might prevent some muscle wasting a little bit, but it's super subjective. Yeah. Eat enough protein. If you're trying to, it's kind of like water. If you're trying to drink enough water, you're mostly going to be pretty hydrated. If you're trying to have a high protein diet, it kind of takes care of itself, and you'll notice that you don't want more. You do want more if you need more or less. It's those people that don't eat anything that I'm trying to convert them over. Like all they eat is carbs and fats. They just need energy and they don't expend energy. And then there's no protein in there. Those are the ones that it's kind of tough with. And I'm like, hey, just start with like a 3 or 4 ounce chicken breast. The 3 topics that I had that were sort of new introductions to this, and I am not an expert on these, so I'm going to let him sort of lead the way. The first one is anti-aging. This is sort of a hot topic. For me, I am in my mid-30s, and I'm really trying to set myself up for a good run in my 40s. It sets up a runway for my 50s and for my 60s. So we've each got kind of a selfish point of like wanting to live a long time, if nothing else, but also wanting to look good and feel good, because now I've seen, what I used to think 50s and 60s was, like, we completely defy that with like my friends that are in their 50s and 60s now. It's just totally different. It used to be in your 50s, like I felt like you had a cane and there was like white hairs, and now like
There are white hairs.
yeah. So
sometimes less of them.
you have this Aging Well podcast, and that's what we're on right now. So welcome to Dr. Armstrong's podcast. So speak to some of, like, I guess, the consumable things that you'd want people to know about anti-aging.
I mean, I have issues with the whole treating people differently because they're getting older, that, we just look at that number. I think that for the most part, we live our lives the same way as we age. And if we're doing that, if we're living a fit, healthier life when we're younger, we're going to age well as we get older. And so the things that you guys are doing right now, trying to improve your body composition, you're going to the gym, you're working out, lifting weights, changing that diet, trying to eat healthier. Those are the things that are going to help slow the aging process. Oftentimes we think, like I teach in my physiology of exercise class, you might remember that the statistics that when you're from 25 to 50, you lose 10% of your muscle mass. And then from 50 to 80, you lose another 40%. It's like, that doesn't have to happen. And the reason that happens is because we become increasingly inactive. What happens when you're 25? You get out of college, you're getting a job, you get kids, all the things in life that start to keep you from coming to the gym. Those are the things that are going to cause you to lose muscle mass. There's no reason why, as we age, we have to lose muscle mass. There's no reason why we have to exercise differently. I kind of stand by the more basic 5 movements, the squat, more of a hip hinge, a bench press or horizontal press, a vertical press, and then like a rowing exercise where you can break it down into a horizontal vertical pull. If you're doing those types of motion, you can do the same thing. You can do a deadlift if you're 80, just like you can do it when you're 20. You might not do quite as much, and especially somebody like yourself who has been much more active and put a lot more stress on your body as an athlete at a younger age. You're going to have to shift. You're going to have to kind of roll things down a little bit as you age. But for those of us that were maybe active but not as abusive to our bodies through sport, I didn't do any sports beyond high school. Just simply, I didn't have the size or the skill level to do it. But I became more fit really as I aged, and I'm going to be 60 the end of April. And my goal is to basically sustain my level of fitness as long as I can, so that when I'm in my 80s, when I'm in my 90s, that's when I become a competitive athlete. I might be able to just outlast everybody else, and you maintain a moderate level of strength. If I deadlifted 420 yesterday, which I feel pretty good about because I never really have done much like that. For some of you, that's probably a warm up. But, if I can continue to do that for another 20, 30 years, I'm going to be kicking ass in powerlifting, right? And so when I look at anti-aging, it's really just offsetting the things that are making us decline. And that is going to be inactivity, excessive body fat. And I don't think, we have to be ripped 6-pack abs unless that's kind of what our goal is performance wise. But from a health standpoint, a moderate body composition, having a moderate diet, moderate to low alcohol consumption, and, again, moderate physical activity. Those are the things that are going to best combat the aging process. Some of the stuff, the gray hairs, those are going to come. There is always a risk of dementia as we age, but we know that exercise, proper diet, proper body composition can minimize those and delay their potential onset. I have become increasingly on the soapbox for resistance training as we age and shifting a little bit more away from cardio. Again, somebody like yourself who has focused much more on strength and strongman type of activities and playing football and things like that in your younger years probably needs a little bit more emphasis on cardio as they get older. For me, cardio is something I did much more in my youth. I have a reasonably good VO2 max. I can maintain that fairly easily, and I don't have to push that as hard as I age. But as we age, one of the biggest things that cause us to get old, other than the calendar, is the loss of muscle mass. We refer to that as sarcopenia. the progressive loss in muscle tissue as we age. And the best way to offset that, resistance training. And if we do resistance training, that allows us to be stronger, to be able to do some of the more day-to-day activities that are going to help us to age a lot better as we get older. And so, you can do more cardio because you maintain some muscle mass. A lot of people that only do cardio doesn't necessarily maintain muscle mass. It's not efficient for the body to carry a lot of muscle around as you're running. You were talking about earlier about running,
I mentioned I got into running last year for 2 weeks before I straightened
which
my hips.
I want to see that. I want a video on that. But
I run beautifully for the record.
But it's not efficient. I mean, he was not a cross-country runner in college for obvious reasons, because it would not be efficient for his body size to be attempting to run fast for a long period of time. And so what's the body do in order to compensate for that? It's going to lose muscle mass as well as fat mass in order to make the body more efficient. And so we want to do enough to keep our heart healthy, but strengthening the body is going to enable us to do more. And one of the things that is come out more in the literature as one of the best indicators of successful aging is just simply strength. It's not necessarily muscle mass, it's strength. And that can be measured by grip strength or just, how much weight you can lift. And if you're stronger and you maintain that strength, you're going to age better. So that's kind of my two-minute anti-aging in a nutshell. Yeah.
Well, and it sounds like it's this kind of basic concept of like use it or lose it, because you're inevitably, if you're not using and applying your body, you're gonna lose it. I pick on my grandma for being heavier and stuff, but like she is damn strong. Like she's still wandering around the garden. Ask how you doing. They're like, yeah, I was pressure washing the sidewalk. I moved this like 100-pound barrel. My grandma's not supposed to be doing this stuff, so I'm like, but I'm not going to tell her what to do, so she'll yell at me. But I think the strength thing is a big one for that. The things that I am seeing is that the body is such a resilient vessel of being able to sustain all the shitty things that we do to it for a long enough period of time. And oddly, I could treat my body like crap for 10 years and then have a year where I reverse all of the effects that I can be sloppy, out of shape, don't lift, do all these things. And my body will really quickly get that stimulus and listen to what I'm telling it to do. So it's one of those things where, in general, wherever your stage is, like, it's really not like a too late point. Grandma's not been very healthy for a while. It's been bigger. And then, 5 to 6 months, we're able to reverse a lot of that. She's active. She doesn't have the sweat. She can breathe. She can go upstairs. Things that she hasn't been able to do for the last couple of years. So, use it or lose it. That's the number one thing I heard from you on that. Lifting is better than cardio. I'm going to say that that's what he said. But, on that end, I told him that the last year I've never done more cardio in my life than in this last year, because I realized I needed a baseline of cardiovascular fitness, and I had made a lot of deposits towards strength. And considering that I'm not trying to do bodybuilding, so I'm not worried about doing too much cardio because I need to do it later, I now just want sustainability. And so elevate my heart rate, keep it moving. So that's part of, on the weeks that I can manage it, it's part of my compounding routine to just elevate my heart rate. I use that a lot from lifting, but the cardio thing has kind of found its way into my routine now, because I've been training 6 days a week, 2 hours for like closer to 20 years now. And so I really don't need probably more of the lifting. That's caused a lot of damage to my body. So now I need the cardio side of things. Do we want to go to Q&A?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably because like the last few things I think we sort of touched on was strength versus cardio. Now, the notes that I had here for strength versus cardio and how you guys might want to program this, because all of us are different, is first, you need to define fitness for you. Fitness to me is a combination of strength. I have strength standards in my head for where my press, my deadlift, my squat, all those things need to be. Those are metrics that I judge myself by. And so I've got that there. There's a certain amount of cardiovascular fitness that I could time in a mile or a VO2 max. And there's a range that kind of works for me. So on the strength versus cardio fitness programming, I just wanted everybody to kind of come away with this idea that it's super subjective. Just like food, what you like and what works for you is going to be very different than what I like and what works for me. But I think that if each one of you guys can, if nothing else, sort of come up with something that works for you, because if I say, Mark, this is how I believe strength should be done, like the applications for Mark now, he wants to, apply his strength and what he wants to do with his life, and even what his life requires him is not the same as me. So I think ultimately you kind of have to make this rational balance of cardio, fitness, flexibility, even like flexible. I remember I heard the word flexibility, and Dr. Castor was one of our professors at Western forever. He's like, well, what is flexibility? And I couldn't really tell him. And basically, it's this subjective thing that per the needs that I have, which is at that time, my needs were based on a sport. I need to be able to squat this low or my hip goes below my knee. So flexibility is defined as being able to do that. How a gymnast defines flexibility is obviously going to be a little bit different. So fitness, I think, is one of those things where I just wanted each of you guys to know that like my version of fitness and strength and flexibility and yours are not going to be the same. They shouldn't be. And for you guys, as you're designing a fitness routine and your lifestyle and your diet, like, fluffy sort of statement, you got to choose what works for you. But that really is sort of the truest thing there. So Q&A for us, because we touched on a bunch of things. Mr. Wasco.
All right, protein question. So when you're looking at your proteins and you just talk about it, when you're weighing out, are you looking at more so just overall picture, or are you looking at the types and kind of the specific breakdowns? I know we're not talking about a ribeye steak. We might be talking about a sirloin, or maybe we're doing a lean hamburger and we strain ours off to kind of minimize fats, or chicken breast versus a skinless chicken thigh. How do you kind of break those down in terms of your proteins?
A lot of it comes down to, I mean, some of it's preference, some of it's budget, availability. But I think, biggest thing is really kind of preference. And, if you have dietary goals, obviously the amount of fat that is in one meat versus another is going to have a big impact in terms of your, if you're looking at your macros, how much fat you're allowed within that. But I think a lot of it is really, for me at least personally, and I'm not as much into like the bodybuilding performance aspect of it, but from a wellness, general body composition, and general performance standpoint, I think it really just comes down to preferences and availability. I wouldn't tell you that you need to go out and eat filet mignon because that's the best meat for you. I mean, personally, I think the best meat is buffalo, because I think it's lean. It's got more nutrients than most other meats. It tastes great, but it's expensive and hard to come by. So if I said that was what you need to be eating, I'd be putting you, kind of hog tying you a little bit. No pun intended in terms of meats, but I think there's some meats that obviously are better quality than others. I mean, I don't like, getting my protein from luncheon meats or, high fatty. Huh?
Are you much for pork?
I don't eat pork. I'm much, and some of that goes back, I'd have to go into a whole lot of my history and stuff like that, but I don't eat shellfish and I don't eat pork. And those for a variety of reasons. Mainly for me, it's like I don't like the thought of eating the things that are like the vacuums of society that kind of clean up all the crap in the water and all that kind of stuff. But I've gone so long without eating pork that if I get it, I know it. Like when I go to a Chinese restaurant, I can almost guarantee that I'm going to have a little bit of gastrointestinal upset within about a half hour after eating it, because I'm going to get some pork fat from something else that they've cooked. But again, if I was starving and I needed protein and it was, that was the only thing was a pork chop, I'd eat it. But I think it really, again, just kind of comes down to where are you going to get your protein that you're going to actually get decent quality protein and eat that. I think probably one of the biggest challenges for many now is that we're told not to eat red meat. So a lot of people don't eat as much red meat. And there's so many things that are in red meat that are important. Like I read recently that I think it's about almost 2/3 of the Americans at all ages are deficient in creatine because we're not eating as much red meat. We have a lot more vegetarians and things like that. And they're actually starting now to prescribe that for more than just athletic performance. And that, when you look at all those people who are deficient in creatine, and that's deficiency would be getting less than 1 gram. I think it's like 1 gram per day. And of those who are deficient, about 14% are suffering from depression. And so if you're not eating red meat, then it's probably a good idea to maybe even supplement that with some creatine.
$19.99 at the nutrition shop here, you can get your creatine.
I like chicken because it's cheap. it generally tastes good. It's relatively low in fat, and then you can do a lot with it. But that's kind of my preference. I like tuna, but I know that tuna is bad because too much tuna is supposed to have all the mercury and stuff in it. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I got my own like 3-second fast one for you. I mostly aim for lean proteins that are lower in fat. So that's chicken, that's ground turkey, that's lean ground turkey, that's whitefish. Protein digestibility, like what you like, and most of the fattier proteins taste really good, like pork and red meat taste good. Most of the lean proteins that I prescribe don't taste very good, so I go for that. But digestion, absorption, ground chicken's $8 a pound right now, apparently, so we're gonna eat less ground chicken at our house. So, there's a practical amount of I go for mostly lean proteins, because if you're eating protein 4, 5, 6 times a day, you couldn't have fatty protein for all of them. I mean, you could, but you'd make adjustments to carbs and that would kind of be complicated. So I want to digest well, and I'm mostly aiming for lean proteins, and I want it to be able to be easily digested and absorbed. And when your gut's not working well with protein because it sits there, you feel like shit, and also you just don't want to eat it. So, but enough chicken and whitefish. You've obviously been on that diet where you're I don't want to eat this anymore. So, yeah.
Can you talk about the difference between how much protein you need in just animal product versus a protein supplement shake or whatever? Is there a magic?
I have a preference. I like to do 1 to 2 shakes a day. I always like a post-workout just for the convenience on digestion, availability, and the fact that dense fibrous proteins like chicken don't absorb super great. They take a long time to break down. So I like a protein shake post-workout. I also sell a lot of protein shakes post-workout, but I genuinely believe in that. And I don't think you're overdoing to always have a post-workout shake. I 50-50 have a post-workout shake, or I go for a meal now. So I've kind of started to break off my own prescription a little bit. And I would say, a couple times a day is fine. It's when you get to where you have 2 protein shakes a day and 2 protein bars, and then you eat once a day. I think that's maybe an imbalance of leaning on the supplement side too much. But I've seen people that are very fit, very healthy, that are just drinking 2 or 3 shakes a day, having a couple bars, and they eat once a day. So it's not to say that it can't be done. I just think you wouldn't want it to be your primary source, and you'd want to ideally get proteins from whole foods. The nutrient base is different. There's some kind of other magical things that they do. But I don't think that having a couple of them a day, especially if you're a person with a crazy schedule and it's either I'm not going to eat and throw off my meal plan, or I'm going to have a protein shake and it's going to tie together the meal plan for me. So, and even this, I have athletes where they're really struggling, and I'm like, dude, if you can't get this meal in, we've talked about this, where we did like your schedule, we couldn't get a meal in, and we just did a 3rd shake. Now that 3rd protein shake had oatmeal and peanut butter and other things, so it was macronutrient friendly, but it was the best we could do in the environment for his work schedule, and I've done this with other people, that was better than no protein. So for me, it's 3 to 4 solid food meals, animal-based or not is fine, but I like animal-based protein, and then 2 shakes a day, plus or minus 1 per person.
Kind of in between.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do 6 meals a day, and I do 3 shakes just out of convenience. I'll do a post-workout in the morning, and then I call it breakfast 1, breakfast 2. So I work out because I have to work out really early. So I'm 4:35 in the morning working out. So I'll have a shake, and then I take my kind of egg white, broccoli, chicken breakfast with me to work, so that as soon as I get to work, then I can eat that meal. And then I teach generally 2-hour classes back to back on most days. And it's really hard to sit down in the maybe 10 minutes between classes and eat a meal. And so it's easy to just kind of down the shake to make sure I get some nutrients in me. And then I'll eat more of another kind of second lunch that's more real food. And then if I work out in the afternoons or get a little cardio or something in, I'll have a shake, and then I have dinner more like probably 7 or 8 o'clock at night. So it just works for me. It's probably not ideal. It wouldn't be what I would recommend, but timing wise, that's what works.
But that or no protein, that's
right. Yeah.
Mark.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference between whey-based and plant-based protein shakes or powder or whatever, and the absorption rates, and if there's any difference between the 2?
I think, and I can't really explain this with great science. I have seen increasingly more and more prevalence of pea-based protein, brown rice, and all these kind of plant-based things. And I think the quality and the balance of them is getting better. It used to be when I saw them first come up, I was like, that's crap. Take away shake. Now there's whey concentrate, there's whey isolate, so you're removing additives, lactose, and fillers, and it's a lot easier for, especially like a female digestive system. Whey isolates and hydrolyzed isolates, which are sort of kind of pre-broken down for you, those do well. Now, I will give clients more flexibility to have the plant-based proteins, but I usually tell them whey isolate first. But I'm more open. I used to be my way or the highway. It was like, nope, sorry, no pea protein. And then now I'm a little more flexible. And in my head, I have this assumption that the quality of those products is just better because there's a lot of people that can't have any type of whey, regardless of lactose intolerance or not. And so I've kind of accepted it more, but I don't know why. He can tell me why.
Yeah, I think, quality wise, based on the amino acids that you actually get, whey protein edges out the pea proteins and the vegetable proteins. But again, if that by either choice or necessity, you can't have dairy, which whey protein, is pretty far removed from really true dairy. It's a dairy source.
Especially when you get to an isolate when the lactose
Yeah,
is pulled out.
you've basically pulled out the stuff that really gives anybody that has dairy issues any problems. But other people, some people eat plant because they have other issues, whether it's, drawing any kind of product from animal or whatever, whatever reasons that somebody might be vegetarian or whatever it might be.
What do you drink?
I drink just a whey protein. And I generally tell my students, because they're on a budget, just pick what is, tastes the best and is best for your budget, because there are differences in quality, but, and so you can spend a lot more and get a really good whey protein, or you can spend less and get a pretty good whey protein, and the difference isn't going to be that great. So for me, it's a lot more of a taste factor. But again, if you're a high level performer, then you might want to go for the much better quality. But the big difference is going to be just in the types of amino acids that are going to be available. That we can't get some of the amino acids from, just simply one plant source, where we get a little bit more out of the whey. But again, the difference is going to be relatively small, that it shouldn't be that big of a deal. But I would lean toward the whey, like you do, over the plant-based, if at all possible, just because it's a little bit better quality and balance for what we need for performance. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Mr. Lovell.
I have a question about the cooked, obviously I'm not eating a lot of chicken or raw meat these days, but, so during off-season consumption for me is a huge issue. I have a hard time eating them. I wake up at 5:30 in the morning, start eating, and I eat at 10:30 at night, just to get enough food in. Off-season, but during your diet down, I cook all the egg whites. I eat a lot of egg whites. It's very clean for me. I find it lower fats. I don't do good with a lot of fats. That means I can't eat as much, so I stay heavy. But so during the off season, to make it easier, I used to just drink egg whites. I don't know how this feels about this because I don't do this anymore. But how do you feel about just drinking straight egg, pasteurized egg whites?
I have an answer.
This is what I do. 2 cups of egg whites, throw in 3 bags of instant strawberry oatmeal, shake it up, let it sit there for an hour, and there's your 50 grams of protein and a huge amount of carbs. 75, 80 grams of carbs takes 30 seconds to drink. And I didn't see something. This is like the grossest thing I've ever seen. If I did, Open Pro Bodybuilder was taking ounces of good chicken, putting it in a blender, and then putting eucalyptus or orange or lemon flavor and blending it and drinking it in 8 seconds.
One of my clients did, just for shits and giggles to share a story, one of my clients tells me this week, hey coach, I really couldn't get my protein in this week, so I just want you to know that I blended the chicken up with some water and I drank it. I was like, thanks son, attaboy.
Was that cooked or raw?
Cooked, yeah, no protein on that. And so I was like, I appreciate the get it done mentality. We're figuring out. What I used to repeat on the egg white thing was that I thought that egg whites were, and I think I'm repeating a bro thing here, that half of it was absorbed from like, he was drinking egg whites and then only half of that protein was absorbed per like 50 grams. So you get 25.
I don't think that's the case. And I'd have to go back to, because I was reading something recently on it, and it actually, you know, any fears that we'd have about raw egg, even a raw whole egg in the shake. So if you have the room in your diet for the added fat and the calories that come from the whole egg, even that is, there's not the risk of salmonella that we used to think there was, that it's relatively really small, and that there's actually some differences in terms of protein synthesis and absorbability between the two, that make the egg a good protein either way, whether you're cooking it or putting it in raw. And I can't remember which favored which in terms of whether it's raw or whole, whether it's better for protein synthesis or absorbability. But the outcome was that they're basically very similar, and that there's not going to be harm in consuming them raw. And so for my son, who he's struggled this season in wrestling to keep weight on, he was a very light heavyweight going into the season, and just the way they train, he's lost weight and just had a struggle keeping the pounds on. And I'm trying to get as much calories in him as possible. And most of the season it was, making like 4 eggs in the morning, and, he'd usually have like English muffin. That was all he could eat. And he'd struggle to get that in. And it's like, dude, you need more calories. And so I'm just starting to kind of make him shakes in the morning, and he doesn't want them in them, but I'm not telling him. But I put like 3 raw eggs in, along with some whey protein and, a bunch of fruit, and, as many calories as I can pack into that shake that he can drink to get going through the day. And he's been fine. It gets the protein in him. It's a little bit easier to consume. And if you need a lot of that protein, to sit down and eat egg whites is really, really hard. It's the most boring food you could possibly eat. It's just egg whites. Even if you put some sriracha sauce on there, or some hot pepper sauce on there, or whatever it might be to spice it up, it still tastes bland. And putting it in a shake, I think, is safe, and it's good quality. I don't think that there's that big difference in terms of what gets absorbed. I think and even if it is, then maybe a little extra is not going to hurt you, but it's a good way to get some extra protein in there easily, and it's a better protein probably even than the whey, because it's a more complete protein. So if it's not giving you the shits, and you haven't died of salmonella, I'd say you're pretty good and keep it up. And the egg whites, they are pasteurized, so they're going to be free of anything. The whole eggs might be a little bit more risky, but I even those I don't think are.
The amount, you try drinking 8 cups of egg white, you're cooking 8 cups a day of cooked egg whites, trying to eat that.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Who's your coach? What an ass.
And unfortunately, son of a bitch. One of those people that can't, there's something in protein powders that I do not get along with, so I'm just doing all that, wasting my time with it. Very minimal. I think if it is, maybe a couple sticks a day or whatever. I'm just curious about the cooks. Because number one, I'm trying to cook the damn things.
You got the answer you wanted.
They are hard to cook. You got to put something else in them. Just plain egg whites, there's nothing you can do to make a plain egg white taste good.
And then I did have another question about the grams per lean body mass, or I've heard 3 different versions. So if you do your body weight, 1 gram for your body weight, 1 gram per your lean body mass, or 1 gram per the lean body mass that you want.
I want 400 pounds of lean body mass. So that one we could probably throw out pretty fast. But for you, you have, and obviously I'm just coaching you, so I kind of know the short answer is we get to a certain point where you're not really wanting to eat much more food in the off season, and we are kind of capped there. And I'm just hey man, just try to get through it. One more bite, come on. And then we go into pre-contest mode where we are obviously burning at a very, very high level, and there's a lot of things going on, and you're ripping through 10 cooked ounces, whereas that is probably more than I would give that guy's body weight. So it's like, it's a moving target probably for us. And you don't look like you don't have enough protein. So like, we know that we're hitting that moving target by, do we have quote unquote enough? Like, yeah. But I think it's one of those things where I've seen women that have like 6 to 7 cooked ounces that weigh 135 pounds that are Olympia level, that are shredded. And that's obviously they're using the protein well, otherwise they wouldn't be shredded. And I've seen you go up to pretty high this last time when we were dieting down. You know,
So that's me asking for getting people with 1.5. I don't mind. I mean, because I've done so long, mine is just, I know what it is.
Yeah.
We know what it is.
one more bite.
Yes.
I think my answer to that question would just be yes. Really, essentially all three of them. I mean, because you can't go wrong in any direction. You know, if you go to your lean muscle mass, it's probably 1 gram is going to be enough to be able to sustain and to continue to maybe even build. At that level, if you're going total body weight, you know, you're probably maybe getting more protein than you need, but is that really going to be harmful? If you're shooting for your goal, you're still kind of calorically, you're moving in that right direction. And I think the difference that's going to be in there, I mean,
Marginal.
yeah, I mean, you're talking like, so say you're 30 pounds of fat, and so that's like a 30 gram difference, right?
120 calories of calories that
Yeah.
are likely not to be stored as fat throughout a
Yeah,
6
so
meal day.
it's a rather marginal.
Well, my thought about that is, so as a new, somebody starting to do this, I remember when I started to do it, was to get that 1.1, 1.5, or, above 1 point, was hard to do initially. So that's why there's a big discrepancy in if you're trying to get a certain, you can demoralize someone, oh, I can't do that, just eating it, just eating so damn much. It can be demoralizing. I've had a lot of clients that are just like, there's just no way I could do this. I think, well, you can, but you just gotta get work into it.
I give people sort of this thing where I meet them kind of with what they can do and how they do feel well. And it's usually with like, I mean, for some of it's a lot of women that like their body doesn't feel great eating a lot of protein. So I just sort of start with like, what can you eat? What is comfortable? Okay, 3 ounces is not likely where we're going to stay, but start with this and we'll kind of go from there. And then the body seems to cue itself and do well and sort of go off that. I had a client in Miami who's dieting down for a contest, and she really needed the probiotics, digestive enzymes to be able to do what we needed to do with some of the increased protein. And it was just that she was used to a sustainable lifestyle of fasting, not eating enough meals. And then now I have her eating 6 times a day, so I just needed to slowly give her body time to ramp. But if I made this non-negotiable lineup, you have to have 150 grams of protein. Her and I, she wouldn't make any progress. So, it's that like enough and just start to slowly taper up. Like I said, I've had women that have a lot, and I've had women that like 3.5 ounces is like, that's where their cap is. What you got?
Thanks for the seminar, first and foremost. I have a question with regard to inflammation management. I think as we moved into the transformation challenge, I went from, let's say, 4 days a week training, 5, and now doing 6. Taking the stretches, sleep enough, but at the same time, I still sort that kind of muscle soreness that prevents you to, keep pushing at the gym.
Yeah.
So my specific question would be, what would be the practical approach that we can take in terms of reducing the inflammation in our body, whether it's diet or whether it's the changing intensity of training?
You or me?
You can start with that.
There's that first acclimation phase of when you begin a new program where you feel like you got ran over by a truck, and this is that first week, 2, 3, and 4. And really there's like a version of that that's in like, I've been training for almost 20 years. So for the first 2 to 3 years, and obviously there's a certain point where it's impractical and you need to maybe have a rest day in between. You got your ice bathing. It's not ibuprofen, so don't think that like you need ibuprofen on that. But I think if you find the right frequency of how far apart you should put, like, let's say leg days. I can't train like such a large muscle group, especially like my knees, my hips, and my lower back, like my spine. Can't really handle like getting hammered on more than about every 3 or 4 days. So I would say like it goes back to like the schedule of training and making sure that there's enough distance between If you have a push day, like one day is a chest day and one day is a shoulder day, those shouldn't be 24 or 48 hours apart. I'd have one on Monday, one on Thursday, 3 to 4 days between major muscle groups. And then there's obviously, like I said, that first month, I could have you push a broom vigorously and you're going to feel like you got ran over by a truck. And be like, trust me, it gets better, just keep going. But you obviously would reduce the weight. You would not like max out on the day that you feel like, you're going to pull something. And so that's this intuitive aspect of listening to your body and making those adjustments. What you think is the greater good. I know very few people that realistically overtrain. Like at a pro level or at an introductory level, like I usually feel that there needs to be like more intensity and like a higher application of force. So I wouldn't lean towards that. Maybe I'm not training enough. For me, it's like what supplements, what amount of sleep, and what do I have to do to be able to sustain this high output? And I will look to do all those things before I'll try to pull back and manage my recovery that way. I used to train 6 days a week in college, and my recovery, my supplements, and my food matched, and I could sustain that. Now I go about 3 days in a row, I take a day off. I go 2 in a row, I take a day off. And I have a higher output on those days. So those 5 days I go harder. But those 2 rest days sort of save my butt. And so that's sort of the Rubik's Cube of you and the adjustments. But also your fitness level now is not going to be, especially in the beginning of this kind of program and transformation, it's going to continue to adjust. So you're going to kind of, I would say, get stronger and get fitter. And that's where you're going to have to do more for even less results, which is kind of the unrewarding part about fitness is as you go farther into it, you got to work harder for less results. But that's also the value that like when you see somebody super impressive from a physical standpoint, hey man, what's the secret? Like a lot of dead animals and 20 years of going up and down from point A to point B. Boring answer, but just try to make intelligent adjustments. Like, that like my spine hurts today. Okay, probably shouldn't back squat today. Let's go hop on a leg press. Or let's go loosen up, do some extra cardio. So I think if you're intuitively at all thinking about your training schedule and your recovery, and you're going to get more fit, that kind of problem sort of solves itself. That's me.
Yeah, I would agree with the comment that overtraining is pretty rare.
Yeah.
The only people I think that you're likely to see overtraining are going to be people who are really, elite level athletes that are poorly coached. And you might want to, look at, is it truly inflammation that we're dealing with, or is it just that novelness of the exercise and maybe just a little bit of mismanaging for how much I'm doing and in what space of time? I tend to be one, I really prefer a higher frequency of training, where for me, it works better to break everything up into much more smaller chunks. I mean, ideally, I would work out 11 to 12 times a week as opposed to 3 times a week because I simply don't have the time. But also, I can recover well from one session to the next when it's a bit of a smaller dose. And so it might just be looking at what are you doing in those workouts? Are you doing too much of something in too little of time? Or would it be better to maybe split that out a little bit more and have a little less stress on your body in that given workout, but be able to recover from it and return back to it? I often use the phrase maximal recoverable volume and minimum effective volumes when I talk to my students. And in order to adapt, you have to be somewhere in between those. And so if you're not doing the minimum, you're not going to see any adaptation. But there are times where if we're going over the maximum and we can't come back the next workout and do what we need to do, we're losing any value of that training because we're not getting enough stimulus. But sometimes it might just be a little less stimulus on this day, and then we were able to do more on the next day. And then overall, our training stimulus is much higher. Does that make some sense? So I would look at it, is it in fact inflammation, or is it just the change in my body right now adjusting to what I'm doing? If it is inflammation, I like that you said don't do ibuprofen, because if you're trying to build muscle, that's one of the worst things that you can really take for muscle hypertrophy, because it actually counteracts the body's immune response that triggers hypertrophy. And so too much ibuprofen is going to just simply limit your muscle gains. Sometimes it's kind of sucking it up and pushing through a bit of that pain. But again, you have to evaluate, is it just simply muscle soreness, the muscle itself being stimulated and kind of resisting that overstress, or is it actually something that I've done to harm myself? And if it's something you've done to harm yourself, you got to look at your programming. What have I done that I need to do differently? And like when you say about squatting and sometimes your back hurts, I found for myself, sometimes when my back is the stiffest, that's the best time to squat, because if I, load it, warm it up properly and work through that range of motion, I'm actually, I don't know if it's relaxing the muscles, but I'm treating the muscles in a
Motion
way.
with motion.
Yeah, it actually responds better. And so it may be doing different exercises with a little different frequency, but usually if it's not an injury-based inflammation, then probably doing more of maybe something different might benefit you more. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think here's like a 30-second, brutally honest answer. This is like my 20th year of training 5 to 6 days a week, pretty heavy, pretty high intensity. I have not hurted or been comfortable since I started, because I'm perpetually always in a recovery cycle, right? I train my legs and my legs need to recover. By the time they've recovered, I train my legs again. So on year 20, I'm just kind of perpetually always sore in some way or another. I'm not injured. My body's doing just fine, but it's one of those things where this lifestyle has this sort of thing to, you're going to be sore forever. Welcome to the gym.
Yeah. If you're sore and your weights are going up, you're progressing, you're okay. It's when your weights start going down that it's a problem.
So, on this inflammation topic, I've understood to avoid ibuprofen. What do you think of turmeric? I mean, turmeric's been a part of kind of our supplementation for reduced inflammation, but in my mind, it's more for joint health and some things along those. Is that good, bad, ugly?
I take a Curcumax, which is a really, really expensive, I call it prescription grade, I don't know what that is, but I take a very expensive Curcumax, or it's called Curcumax, and it's a very expensive curcumin turmeric thing. I noticed tremendous benefits from it. I feel better, so I'm going to keep taking it. And that was one of the ways. I've never been an ibuprofen person, kind of anti-pills, anti-ibuprofen. As I get older, I notice that I'm leaning more on Tylenol and ibuprofen at times, but that seems to do pretty well for me personally.
I haven't really taken it or tried it, but from what I've seen in literature, I mean, it's fairly supportive. And if it's working for you, and like anything, if it's working for you and it fits within your budget and your lifestyle,
I don't know if I'm working, but I take it.
Well, but I mean, are you feeling less inflamed as a result of taking it? Then it's probably
negative on building muscle when I try.
No, they're the chemical level of what's going on with that supplement being a micronutrient's not the same versus a literal drug on an NSAID anti-inflammatory drug. Yeah.
I'm not even sure if there's any toxicity level of it. I mean,
There's gotta be.
there's probably is, but I mean, nobody's taken.
So
He's had his hand.
Information from a competitive standpoint, just from the information question alone, so we're getting up to about 6 weeks through the challenge. They got about 6 more weeks to get through it. As we approach maybe even 4 weeks, do you think you could reach a point where your caloric intake is low enough that your energy output in the gym alone is higher than that, and then maybe you're feeling a little bit more energy fatigue than you are, maybe less inflammation, but through that, would you maybe do something like pull a compound and insert a machine so you can kind of hammer out those next 4 weeks, or would you maybe give them a little bit more food to make them feel a little bit better about still getting through that workout and kind of dancing around that, I guess, from the standpoint of you're 4 weeks out from a competition and trying to hit a certain
Yeah, you're probably better on that one.
This is because that's really similar to what we're experiencing during prep. I make modifications to the training for anybody when I need to, dieting down is hard. So you in the back when you ask the information question, your body is tired when it is burning fat. That is a taxing process that you don't feel as primed or as great versus when you are well fed or I give you a cheat, whatever. You're tired, I give you a cheat meal, you instantly feel good in the gym, but ultimately we're trying to burn fat. That's a taxing process to the body. And so we will sort of accept the decrease in efficiency from a training standpoint to not, hammer through basically is kind of what I'm saying in that. But for me, and people dieting down, I will adjust compound movements. Maybe not a good time to be deadlifting and back squatting. And if you could, that's great, but let's go ahead and, throw a hack squat in. It's stable. We're preventing injury. You're already in a tired, stressed, depleted depleted state. So yeah, I think
But at
that,
that point too, the deficit becomes more important. And
yeah, like,
you need to feel better.
yeah, like you're not primed for performance. You're not in even like a maintenance amount of calories, especially as like you're at the end of a stretch, like there's a compound effect where after like weeks 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, this sucks.
And long story short, at the end of the transformation diet like that, 4 weeks out, you should probably not be feeling like you were 12 weeks.
Yeah, and like we bring him back from the dead. I mean, Tim and I were talking like how I kind of did this last year on like he had like got spray tan, like loaded up a little bit of a burger, get a little glycogen pump, and then like come in for that. So do you need to like cross the finish line of a challenge like completely ragged? No, like you don't. So yeah, that's me. Anything to add?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, and it's a different performance basis. I mean, if you're dealing with an athlete that's maybe having to cut weight for performance, it might be a little bit of a different response.
You can bring them back from the dead. Like I make weight with powerlifters or athletes or even wrestlers, and like, all right, liquid IV, like load up a burger and like, throw enough gas in the tank that by the time we put this car on the track, it can actually race, well enough.
Can you take in too much amino acids, and does it have an effect on the liver and the kidneys?
I mean, theoretically, if you take up too much, it can be a stressor on the liver and the kidneys. But generally, the liver and the kidneys, if they're healthy, are capable of dealing with whatever you kind of push at them. And it would take a lot to really overrun a healthy kidney.
We're all taking like pre and post workout drinks, and they're all packed with amino acids of some sort or another. And so it's like you almost get addicted to them. You take them all the time. So I was just curious if it really could have a negative effect on some parts of the body.
I think
You'd have to really overdo, like to a point of toxicity from an amino acid, which is like the amount of amino acids in your protein. Like I think you'd have to you'd have to really, really do something heroic. Like I drink 5 gallons of hyper concentrated amino acids to a point of toxicity.
I think the greatest risk would be to your wallet. If you're, I mean, seriously, if you're really, really overdoing the protein and amino acids to any great extent, you're buying him you still driving you probably have a new truck. You used to have a big old red truck.
Oh yeah, no, that's
You're just paying his mortgage or things like that if you start taking too much. And so I think for most it's not going to be a big risk.
I don't prescribe a lot of amino acids. Like I really prescribe branched chain amino acids and some essential aminos when somebody's in a deficit and they're cutting. Or realistically, carbohydrates are your energy, and your body doesn't really use a lot of the amino acids unless you're kind of more in a deficit. Most of the research says that that's when you sort of need the amino acids. It's like cutting or in like a performance window where your body doesn't have other energy as like a priority. Ideally, in Gatorade, the superfood, like drinking carbohydrates, like while I'm burning through energy is kind of the way to go. That you can't diet down doing that. So the amino acids in the absence of that energy, I think work pretty well. But that's like in a window of exercise. In general, I'm drinking this. Why? Because I like flavored beverages that taste like Kool-Aid that don't have calories. That's why I'm drinking it.
Right, yeah.
Chris, you're an amino acid. Yeah, you're an amino energy junkie.
But I mean, doesn't it have some synergistic value to help prepare the muscle that you just tore up while you were working out?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I mean, it's like essentially you're eating or consuming proteins that have already been broken down. In a sense, is what the amino acids are. So
Then the branch chain also help complete some of the incomplete proteins that we take.
yeah.
Questions that would make it to the end of the run? Hey, you're 3 in the books. Yeah, my thought was I was thinking about you guys when you were coming. I'm like, shit, I better get Mark something different. I can't just go through like 4 calories per carbohydrate. I got to give you guys something. Well, cool, guys. That's it. So that's the seminar on this. Obviously, I'm around. You can find the Aging Well podcast and Dr. Armstrong online. So if you guys want to connect with him, that's an easy thing to do. And then we appreciate you guys coming. You got what? Are we halfway through the challenge? Yeah, 6
I don't know.
weeks.
You're looking at me.
Yeah, 6 weeks through, and I'm like, 6 weeks, you can do anything in 6 weeks. I was super fat out 6 weeks out from a show one time. I'm like, Coach, I'm super fat 6 weeks out. He's like, you can do anything in 6 weeks. So like, yeah, we got a lot of time. So cool. Thank you guys for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time,
keep aging well.